Line's good.
Never on.
Whoa.
Hard. Hardly.
Come on, Brent. Line's good. Got real close.
The hair high, right?
Try and hit 2/3.
Have they saved it for her? Yes, they have.
Ooh, welcome to Game of Stones, everybody. I am Sean Graham, Scott, alongside, as always. Hello, Scott.
Sean, hi. I'm getting kind of excited because I have tickets to go see a Broadway show here in Ottawa in a couple weeks, and it's called The Lion King. Heard of it?
Yeah, I think I've heard of it before. That's essentially Shakespeare, right?
Yeah, Hamlet.
Yeah, it's Hamlet, but with lions.
But with lions, yeah. I feel like I saw this musical in like 1999 in Toronto.
Yeah, I definitely have a memory of going as a kid. I don't know if Mom took you and I at the same time or separately, but definitely saw it as a kid.
I think there were other people there too. Mom, let us know when you hear this. We're curious. But yeah, it's coming to the NAC. I'm pretty excited. But it got me thinking, Sean, if there was one show that could come to the NAC so that you could just, walk over there and watch it, which show would it be?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think Lion King would be up there because it's a show that's... So the National Arts Center, for anyone who's never been, is set up for the orchestra. So it kind of echoes a little bit. Sometimes it can be hard to hear lyrics in the National Arts Center. So a show like Lion King that's really about the spectacle, I think works pretty well in that theater. So I think that has to be pretty high up on it. Maybe something really classic like a West Side Story, but like original West Side Story. I saw the Weirdo revival a few years ago.
Yeah.
Did not like it all, but like classic West Side Story could be pretty cool. Maybe like a Phantom of the Opera could work well in that room as well. So something like that. But I think it has to be kind of big and showy.
Yeah. That's a good point. I've had a lot more fun since I moved seats. And so we're like a little bit closer to the action. And when I went to London, I got like super cheap tickets, you just sort of buy them.
Sure.
Like, what do you want? And anyway, I was in like the third row. And being able to see the actors like do the acting is like pretty important to this kind of thing, right? And so those small theaters that they have in New York and in London are like just awesome to see stuff. And the NAC, you're right, is a bit cavernous and big, but good choices. I'm also going to see MJ the musical, which I believe won best musical, right?
Certainly the guy who played MJ won Best Actor. I don't remember if it won Best Musical, but it certainly was nominated and is highly acclaimed.
I think it was the year that it was all jukebox musicals that were the nominations, like that COVID year. Right. But anyway, excited for that. Anyway, I just wanted to ask you about that on the show.
Yeah, I had a colleague once say that they found Lion King, one of the big problems with Lion King is that it was unrealistic because, and I assume this is true, but that in lion culture, lions, it's the female lions are the ones that are in charge and not the male lions. And so the female lions are controlling everything. And they're like, well, so it's unrealistic that the male lions are the ones in charge. And I thought, okay, fair enough. But I think the most unrealistic part of The Lion King is the talking of the lions and some of the choreography. It's a little more Jerome Robbins, and I really think lions are more Bob Fosse-esque when they're doing their big organized choreographed numbers. So, just a weird note on Lion King there. That's the most unrealistic thing.
Yeah, I can't really argue with you on that point.
Yeah. So with that, let's turn our attention, Scott, to the world of curling. If you listened last week, we talked about the big change for Kevin Cooey and Aaron Slaczynski, and I expressed a little bit of concern as to what this meant. After we recorded, we got the news that EJ Harnden and Brad Gushue's team were going their separate ways. I recorded just a little quick note that I put into that episode to say that we recorded before that happened. So we had that news. And then yesterday, Scott, we got the news of who was going to take EJ Harden's place. That is Brendan Bottcher, the coach for Rachel Homan this season. He is going to step in at the second position. And as it currently stands, he is going to play second and he is going to sweep. He's not going to go into the house. It's just purely there as the second. So Scott, before we get into some of the other things that I've written down on my sheet here, what is your initial take on this news?
I was pretty shocked that Team Gushue, coming off 3 Briars in a row, would make this kind of switch right now. They're the team that everyone is trying to catch up to. Mm-hmm. And so maybe their thought is, let's beat them to it, because there's one player out there that, has beaten us in Canadian championships. And so I was like super, super surprised. And I guess if I was a journalist, I would try to dig for a little more about why, because I don't really understand it. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm also a little confused. I don't fully understand what Team Gushue or EJ Harden learned in the last 6 weeks that they didn't know going into the season, and sort of why that break happened. He didn't have a good game in the final of the Grand Slam, but that's not why they're not together, obviously. And it's a longer term issue. So yeah, I wonder about that. I similarly, like I said last week, like with Jacques Gauthier, what did the start of the season show that wasn't clear last year? Yeah. So that is a bit of a mystery. I could see if there's an injury or if travel's in the way or if there's some sort of personal something that, and if they don't want to disclose any of that, they don't have to. They don't owe us anything on that. The timing of it, though, is a little strange. And you do wonder what the sequence of events was. Was the decision to make the change first and then you find the replacement? Or was there a discussion with Brendan Bottcher during the slam because he was around with Rachel Homan? Like, if he's in the building, you're just talking and, maybe this could be a thing. Like, I do wonder about that. I don't think we're going to get a clear answer on what the sequence of events was, but it really does just kind of make you wonder about what does this mean? As I said last week, what does this mean for the sport? And is this going to become more normal?
Yeah. And I sort of pushed back on that last week about, no, they'll be fine. As long as they keep control themselves. And then this comes out and I'm like, wow. Yeah. Like, I don't believe that a team that is whatever they are, third in the world right now, would just would make the move without the replacement in mind.
Right.
And I think all that's stopping this from being like the TSN Trade Center is they take a few days before they announce it.
Right.
Right. It's not like they said, we're picking up Brendan Bottcher and EJ Harden is DFA'd off the team. So you can't think that, how many months away from 14 months away from the Winter Olympics? Yeah, that a team is going to say,
we're 13 from the trials.
Yeah. That a team is going to say, you're done, but we don't know who we're going to pick. That doesn't make any sense. You are right, though. It could be something that they just don't want to tell us, and that's fine. Right.
That's fine.
And we're just a couple of guys shooting the breeze about curling. So no inside scoop from us, but it seemed weird.
Yeah. So the timing was a little strange for sure. And the positioning is a little strange that Brendan Bottcher is going to come in as the second. It was interesting to me, Scott, in the sense that if you remember all the way back to 2005, so 19 years ago, you'll remember that a young upstart Brad Gushue joined forces with with Russ Howard.
Yes.
And Russ Howard was throwing the second stone and calling the game for Brad Gushue. Bit of an upset, I would say, that they won the 2005 trials, go to the Olympics, and win the gold medal. Still, one of the most irrationally frustrating things for me is that Gushue had a shot, I believe, for 7 in the gold medal game, and he missed it and only got 6. It was a draw.
Yeah.
Like I was so irrationally upset that he missed that for some reason, and that I still remember it. But they go and win the gold medal, and you wonder here that in the comments yesterday, Brad Gushue talked about retirement and whether that's going to be at the end of next season or if he's going to do another cycle. But you do wonder if this is almost this full circle moment where Gushue went to the veteran and learned when he needed at that point of his career to go to the next level. Mm-hmm. And here's Bottcher. He's ahead of Gushue at the same point in their careers. He's won a national championship. He's won Grand Slams, right? Gushue had not done that at that point of his career. But Gushue now, in his comments yesterday, talked about working with Brendan and the experience probably being mutually beneficial in learning and developing, but that Brendan could take this and then continue his career once this team ends, whenever that is. And
right.
If that goes through to the point where Mark and Brad retire, and then what that looks like for Brendan. So you do wonder about that, the full circle-ness of Brad Gushue's career and how, not that would have probably played a part in his thinking, but I think it's just kind of an interesting book note on his career as it relates to Olympics.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point. I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. That is sort of what kickstarted him. You know, he'd already had some success, but bringing in the veteran to sort of show them the ropes and show them how to win. And then being able to pay that back at least a little bit, so very interesting to think about it that way. There's a couple more things that are in the release about Bottcher, but do you want to tee that kind of stuff up? Is there anything else about the departure?
There's nothing else about the departure. I'm curious to see what EJ Harnden does here. Again, if it's purely a curling decision, does EJ Harnden find his way as a 5th somewhere? I mean, the obvious landing spot for the rest of the season, if they need a player, is Team Dunstone. His brother's there. That's an obvious spot. Obviously, the relationship with Jacobs, if they need a guy to come in and step in at some point or be a 5th for an event, those are a couple, I think, obvious landing spots for him. The other reality of it, too, is that the situation in Northern Ontario is such that, with all due respect, I mean, Trevor Bono is great, and there are other great players up there. But if EJ Harnden got 3 guys who were pretty good together, it'd be very interesting if he put a team together and skipped them into the Brier, which, who did that? Adam Casey did that, right? 1 year playing out of Saskatchewan, I think, or maybe when he was out east, so he lost his team, or the team he was on broke up, and he said, all right, I'm just going to skip, and he makes it all the way to a Brier. So that would be kind of an interesting way for EJ Harnden to go. So it'll be interesting to see what comes of that. But
and of course, Sean, Aaron Slachinski's old team is probably looking.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, they could use a guy, but residency rules on that one would be tough. I don't know if Kyle Darian's moved west or if he still lives in Manitoba, but that would be the only thing, unless Kyle Darian, I don't know how old he is, if he's in school or something, and all the waivers that go along with that, or I don't know, just sign up for a class. I don't think it's all that hard. But so there are options out there for sure. Should note, in terms of residency rules for Team Gushue, they were already not complying with residency rules anyway, but they just kept winning. So it didn't matter for them. And if you look at CTRS points for this season, they are 150 points ahead of Mike McEwen, who's in 3rd place. 160 points or 58 points, 57 points ahead of Matt Dunstone, who's in 4th place. So they have to be top 3 if we're looking at Briar for next season. So they, at this point, are not concerned about residency rules relative to qualifying. For Briar, I would say they don't really care about the Briar next season. But as we saw in 2022, maybe Gushue would double dip again, like he's done it before. So if the opportunity presented itself, we can't say for sure that he would not play in that Briar.
Yeah. And one of the things that stood out, I know we're going to talk in full about Brad's comments and Brendan's comments, but one of the things that Brad said in his speaking with the press was that, it'll be good to have somebody who's in Alberta that can go and practice with Jeff.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, well, so what are you saying?
Yeah.
Saying Jeff needs a little practice?
Or Jeff's a little lonely, I guess, out there practicing. Need somebody to help him reset the stones, or
hold the broom. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, Jeff could look across the dinner table and find somebody who is very good that could help out. I mean, they probably need to get a sitter to make that work, that they could both go together. But he has somebody who's very, very good in his household that he could practice with. So Gushue talked yesterday with Devin Haru at the CBC. A couple comments really stood out to me, Scott. One is Brendan Bottcher's never swept before. He is a skip through and through from his junior career all the way in. So Brad talked about how initially they don't expect him to be a good sweeper, and there is no expectation of that. And that if they can get to the point where Brendan Bottcher is an average sweeper, they feel as though that's a win for the team.
Which is like this, okay, we're bringing in this new guy and, we want to boost him up, but and I will admit, the first thing I thought, Sean, when I heard that Brendan Bottcher was going to play second, was he's going to need some higher socks to keep his ankles warm while he's doing that sweeping.
Yeah, for sure. I wear soccer socks that go all the way up to my knees when I play. Yeah, that's
I mean, like he's in good shape. It's not like he's not going to have the ability to do it, right? It's going to be about the judgment, reading the releases, all that kind of stuff that, it takes time to develop those skills. So they shouldn't expect that to be like right on right away. But at the same time, like he practices with his team or used to practice with his team. So I'm sure he knows how to be a second. It's not like he's going to be like, what side of the sheet do I stand on? Like, that kind of stuff.
Right. And he did spend years and years watching Brad Thiessen and Ben Hebert sweep all of his team's rocks. So he's seen a lot of really good sweeping, and presumably he can do some. Brad did say in his comments too that Brendan is a tall guy, and I think he is I think he's like 6'2" or 6'3" or something. I think he is a tall guy. So that gives him a bit of an advantage putting leverage on the broom, but he's not as thick, I guess you would say, as someone like Hebert or EJ Harnden. So he doesn't have the same kind of mass that he's putting the pressure on the broom, but he will have that leverage with his height for sure. Another thing that stood out to me is Brad said, Brendan, great player, already won a national championship. And that when the time comes that Mark and I retire, whether that's in 2 years or 4 years, he will go on to win a lot of stuff. This is, I don't think it was intended this way, but to me, it really sounded like he can't beat us right now. So we have to get off the stage and then he'll be able to come in and win. I don't think it was meant that way, but when I first heard it and I went and played it back again, I thought like that's, I don't know. You could interpret it that way, which I thought was very unintentionally funny.
Yeah, that is quite funny. Well, I mean, and presumably he's going to win a lot of stuff on your team with you there in the next
so.
2 to 4 years, right?
Yeah.
Also, but yeah, pretty funny. And I think like this is Brad Gushue's like self-awareness that he knows all the other teams are just trying to catch him.
Yes.
Because of what they've been able to do. He knows that he is one of the best skips because he's the most consistent.
Yep.
Right. And he's talked to you about that, right? But consistency being the key. And with a team in front of him that can make shots the way they can, you know, it makes your job a lot easier as the skip too.
Yeah.
So I think this is the right call to bring in somebody. If you're going to change your team, you bring in the best player, right? It's not like there's salary cap considerations. What like we saw, one of the things in the quotes too was, you know, we saw Team Carrie Anderson come together and they were all skips and everyone was like, oh, that's not going to work. They can't sweep.
Sure.
Well, you know, like they're pretty freaking good. So
yeah, I think it's worked out
pretty well.
Yeah. And here's one difference though that I would just point out, and this is not to slight at all Shannon Burchard or Breanne Harris. They had not achieved as much as skips as Brendan Bottcher has.
No.
Right. So he has achieved a level of success at the skip position that is different from what that team was coming into the team as. So one of the things that I'm curious to see is it's kind of like when a coach gets fired and then becomes an assistant coach, right? Like you have to, like, you're not in charge anymore, right? Like, so how does that going to work? And obviously Brendan Bottcher is going to have input. The seconds for the past decade on this team have had a lot of input on strategy, and that is not going to change by any means. But ultimately, you go from you're the one making the final decision to you're not the one making the final decision. And this is going to be the first time in his curling career where he's not the one making the final decision. That I think he can do it, but that is certainly, I would think, going to take some getting used to.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when you're Brendan Bottcher and this opportunity comes up, those are things that you have to, you know, discuss beforehand and reflect on, think through. Honestly, like sitting at home for the first 2 months of the season has probably not been easy. And when, you know, your team basically fires you and you're not able to put together another team so easily, you probably reflect a bit on it and say, what do I need to do to put myself in a position to once again be leading a team that's going to win national championships? And so this seems to make a lot of sense from that perspective for Brendan Bottcher, right? He's got the chance to join the number one team in Canada. He's got the chance to learn a little bit more about the skipping position from maybe the greatest in Canadian history. He's on the Mount Rushmore.
Yep, for sure.
And do it all while like also competing in a high level. I think it's kind of like, well, yeah, okay, I'll learn to sweep. Like that's not a big deal.
Right. And he's got time, right? He's got a year to be for this team to be in top form.
And what it also does, Sean, is it takes him off the table for other teams.
Yeah.
Right. If there's other teams out there that think, hey, you know what, I could add somebody who's a former Canadian champion who can make all of the shots. You know, maybe we swoop in first and get that player first.
For sure. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Gushue plays this weekend. Bottcher will not be there. He will be on the team playing at the Pan-Continental Curling Championship. That'll be their first event together. And as Brad Gushue says, there's going to be some rough patches along the way. But I'm going to just go out on a limb here, Scott, and say they will qualify Canada for the World Championship out of that Pan-Continental.
Yeah.
Going out on a limb on that one.
That would be a wild story if they did not.
Yes, and although does Canada have which ones where this year is the men's in Canada?
Sean, let me look.
Okay, trying to remember where stuff was last year. I feel like the women's was abroad.
BKT Tires World
That can't be
Men's
right. No, I
Curling.
take it back. Because the men's World Curling Championship was in Ottawa in 2023.
Yes.
So it has to be in Canada this year.
So, Sean, it is in the lovely burg of Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan.
Oh, nice. I love Moose Jaw. Do the
Yeah.
tunnels tour, people. If you're out there, the tunnels tour is great. And beautiful art out on the streets there in Moose Jaw.
Yeah.
All right. So, Scott, out of this, there were some things that occurred to me. And, there's an old saying that once is an accident, twice is a trend, three times is evidence. So here we are. We have a trend now of changes early into the curling season. But I have evidence of another trend, and that is people, and this is specific to the men's side, players taking a step away and stepping away from the sport. And are they really taking a step away from the sport? So I have a few examples here. And Mark Kennedy was the first one that came to my mind. And this is partly because at the Continental Cup that was in London, Mark Kennedy, during the up close and personal segment, said when he was sitting next to Kevin Cooey, "This is the only skip I want to play with for the rest of my career." That's 2 skips ago. But he did say that. And then they went to the Olympics and he came back. And in March of 2018, he announced that he was going to take a step back from curling. Part of this was health for him. He had to get an operation, but he said he was tired. This was enough. There's a story here from the Edmonton or the Calgary Sun from April of 2018 where it's his last event. It's the Champions Cup, RIP Champions Cup. And it's him and Ben Hebert is the thread of this article, talking about how they've played together for 12 years. They've known each other for so long, how it was going to be emotional for Mark at the end of the week to step away. And how Ben Hebert, I tried to talk him out of it just because how good he is. His mind was made up. And Hebert does say, I don't think he's going to be done forever. And that is really prescient because, Scott, in March of 2019, Mark Kennedy announced his triumphant return to curling. He's ending his retirement, as the CBC headline writers decided to put, and joining Brad Jacobs. Now, part of this is Mark Kennedy had come and kind of bailed out the team after Fry was suspended, or however you want to classify that situation. And it seemed obvious that the dynamic worked.
Yeah.
So, it was less than a year for Mark Kennedy stepping away.
Yeah.
Brad Jacobs, March 22nd, 2022, he announced that he was going to be stepping away from curling. In an article in the Sioux Star, he was quoted as saying, "My priorities have changed a little bit. Life has changed a little bit for myself and my family, and for the better. I am excited about some things we have going on and some new challenges moving forward. Right now, competitive men's curling and staying out on tour and continuing with that grind is not in the cards for me." That's March 22nd, 2022. On December 9th, 2022, Brad Jacobs appeared on That Curling Show with Colleen Jones and Devin Haru from Mexico on vacation with his family, announcing that he was coming back. In that moment, he said just for the provincial playdowns, but as we know, he has not left since then. So that is a whole 6 months.
Wow. 6 months. Look at this.
Yes. Now, Colleen Jones and Devin Haru did start that interview by saying, "What changed?" I basically read a quote similar to that, not that exact quote, and said, "What changed?"
And what was the answer?
Basically that it wasn't a full comeback. He was just coming out for play downs. And so that was his answer.
I guess, so, these people retire and they say, "Oh, I want to spend a little more time with my family."
Yeah.
And then maybe their family's like, maybe you should spend a little more time on the road.
Yeah, we've had enough of you. Yeah.
I'm just saying that generally, not about Brad Jacobs.
No, not about these particular cases. No.
No.
And then, of course, with this one, Brendan Bottcher, the announcement that the team was breaking up earlier in the spring. And then on May 27th, the story came out that he was going to coach Team Homan. And in the story, Brendan Bottcher is quoted as talking about being how excited he is and how this is going to give him an opportunity to take some time, look at things, really focus on the mixed doubles game. And he was quoted in this as saying, "In all honesty, I think I'm going to come back a more well-rounded curler than I left. I'm going to learn a few things along the way here from both these two experiences."
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how much he could have learned in the last 4 months. But like
4 months, that's one university term, you know? The best curlers, you can learn a lot.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I assume he's going to keep up with the Homan schedule and fulfill that commitment. There's no word that he wouldn't be doing that. But again, just these things that I've noticed of these guys coming out when things change and saying, "Oh, we're going to do this," and then it changes so fast. Kevin Cooey at the Briar, he was asked directly, "Is there going to be a lineup change for next season?" He said, "Not that I've heard of." Well, to be fair, I guess he hadn't heard of that yet or hadn't made the decision yet. I can't keep track, Scott, of the number of times that John Morris has stepped away from the 4-person game just to come back, or that Mike Fournier has retired. You just lose track. So at some point, do we just not stop believing these guys when they make these announcements? Or is this just part of the game of curling at this point where guys are going to say, "Well, we'll step back," or "I'm going to reevaluate," or because I don't know, is there a pressure that when a lineup change happens and the musical chairs immediately ends, if you don't have a chair or don't have a chair that you're satisfied with, there's this announcement of something else other than I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, "I'm not really feeling the options that are available right now. I'm just going to take my time and see what comes." But so many times it's like, "Oh, we're going to take a step back. We're going to do this." And sometimes just or pull it. Like Chelsea Carey has always been like, "Yeah, I want to play." And when people come and good opportunity, I'll do that. And we respect Chelsea Carey and love Chelsea Carey's honesty. And sometimes I feel like some of these announcements are almost more just to cover yourself or I don't know.
Well, what's wrong with saying nobody wants to play with me?
Or just saying nobody who I think is good enough to play with me wants to play with me, right? There's nothing wrong. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No. And it's honestly, if nobody wants to play with you, then maybe take a look in the mirror and say, "Hey, if nobody wants to play with me, maybe the problem is not them."
But all these guys get other spots, right? They all get spots again.
Well, everybody forgets,
I guess. But I mean, if you look at the last, 6 or 7 Briars, whatever, we did this math at some point. And the McEwen making it to the final last year has opened this up, but it's 15 guys who have played in Briar finals in the last 10 years or so. It's an insanely small number.
It is
that play. So they all and Brendan Bottcher said this, he was asked on the Cullen and Doherty show today about, when you go play Team Jacobs, is it going to get psyched up for it? And he was like, "Well, no, not really. I mean, if you look at basically everyone's played with everyone else, you can't really do that." So the movement that's there, I don't know. It's just something that I noticed and it highlighted with me yesterday when Bottcher was talking, and I heard some of the quotes because he was on yesterday with Kevin Martin. And I thought this, and it's not just him, but this happens a lot where one thing is not the other thing. And I get that circumstances change, your situations change, and the way you feel physically and emotionally at the end of a season is different than you're going to feel in October. And I totally get all that. It just, I don't know, it stands out to me for whatever reason.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same for us, right? By the time the end of the season's coming along, they're like, oh, yeah, I don't want to go to the rink anymore. We're done. It's 20 degrees outside. I want to be doing other things. And then, the leaves start turning and it gets a little crisp chill in the air. And you're like, yeah, it's time for curling.
Yeah.
So maybe the same thing happens to these top level athletes. Who knows?
I think so. I think so. I mean, Rachel Holman, they were saying on the broadcast, she was excited to come back, felt that the offseason was long. And the other three members of the team apparently said, oh, it's kind of a short offseason. So they were kind of enjoying their downtime a little bit. But it did prompt me, Scott, to Google shortest sports retirements.
Yeah.
Just to see it. So it's not a curling thing at all. This is just a sports thing. Sugar Ray Leonard retired 5 times. One time his retirement lasted a week. Brett Favre, he retired for a couple months in 2008. Tom Brady retired for 10 days. When the first time he retired, got all those accolades, and then
and said, oh, let's run it back.
Let's do it back. Roger Clemens retired for 3 months at the end of the 2003 season and came back, announced his return in January 2004. Floyd Mayweather Jr., he retired in May 2007, came back in July 2007. And then this is from the Sydney Morning Herald. Ben Hudson, an AFL player, he did the same thing, announced that his intention was to retire for 2012 at the end of the season, and he came back a couple years later. So this is a common thing in sports, happens all the time. So I don't mean to highlight curlers in particular, but it's something that I don't know. And I've never been in that situation. I don't want to cast any aspersions, but at some point with some of these statements, both in curling and other sports, when it comes to stepping away or retirements, taking it with a bit of a grain of salt. I will note that Nolan Thiessen, Colin Hodgson, to this point, Glenn Howard, have all retired and stayed retired. I mean, Russ Howard even came back for a brief period to play in a couple Briars as New Brunswick after he had stepped away. So, I mean, these things, those guys are in that list. The women's side, I think, has been more consistent on when people have stepped away. They've stepped away, but I don't know. It's just one of these things that, and I think partly it's because curling is a sport you can play forever. So,
yeah,
nothing's really ever off the table.
No, Sean, it's really not. And I would be remiss here if I didn't bring up one of the most famous retirements that then did not end in retirement, which is Jay-Z announcing with the Black Album that he's done. I just looked it up. Since the Black Album came out, he has released 5 solo records and 4 collaboration records. So 9 albums in total post-retirement for your boy Jay-Z. Yeah. So
I feel like rock bands have done a ton of farewell tours.
Yes. I feel like the Rolling Stones have been on a farewell tour for the last 20 years.
Yeah. I remember Elton John, I think this was pre-pandemic, announced that it was time for him to retire, spend more time with his family. But at the same time, he said, I'm going on a 2.5-year world tour.
Yeah.
This is my farewell tour. It's time to spend more time with my family. But before that, I'm taking 2.5 years in my 70s to go on the road.
Yeah. Sean, I just watched Saturday Night Live from this past weekend, and Stevie Nicks was on performing at the age of 76. She was pretty good. And also they did a sketch or a thing on Weekend Update about Oasis, who are apparently coming back together for a world tour next year. So these things happen, right?
They do.
Nothing's permanent in the 24-hour news cycle.
Yep.
And it gave us something to talk about today.
So there you go. There you have it. Let us know if there are other retirements that stuck, like Eve Muirhead, or didn't stick, that maybe we have missed that are pretty notable from the sport. because this has been a very newsy fall, a surprisingly newsy fall. We don't usually get this sort of news here at this time of year. It's usually more about, the games on the ice.
Yeah. But, little bit of news, never hurt anyone. And we'll be able to talk a little bit more about the games in the weeks to come.
Absolutely. So if you have not yet, please do subscribe for all that great content, wherever you get your podcast, likes, rates, comments, all that good stuff. Helps other people find the show, keeps us growing. Of course, you can head on over to GameOfStonesPod.com. All of our past episodes are there, plus a link to the merch. We're on the socials at Game of Stones Pod, Game of Stones Podcast on Facebook, and let us know what you want to hear. Game of Stones Podcast at gmail.com. Scott, speaking of the games, we should give a shout out to Team England and the Professor of Peel. They won a Bonspiel this past weekend. I watched the last few ends of it on a stream, and I can't remember the name of the spiel off the top, but the final, they dominated.
Yeah. I clicked the link, and I was at an Airbnb this weekend, and it asked me to stream it to the TV, and I did it, but then it stopped working. So I didn't see really any of it, but good job. I followed along in the WhatsApp group. Good job by Team England. Nice tune-up for the upcoming European Championships, which I'm pretty excited for.
Yeah, the Forfar Indoor Sports Arena or Indoor Sports. That's what it was. It was, I don't know the name of the spiel, but they won it.
Nice. Way to go.
Yeah, so congratulations to them on that. And otherwise, it was a relatively quiet weekend out on tour. There were a lot of events around Thanksgiving for sure, but nothing major, I don't think.
No, we do have the World Mixed Championships ongoing.
Yeah.
Right now we are at, I had it and then I lost it. We're about 6 games in. There's 5 groups with 49 teams in total. It's pretty good. A cool thing from this event is that we saw the first ever international curling match for a team from Puerto Rico, which is pretty cool.
Yep.
They're yet to pick up their first win. And a friend of the show from Hong Kong, Ling, played her, I think I saw on Facebook, her 100th international game.
Yeah, her or Jason, one of the two of them posted that as 100th international game, which is very cool.
Yeah, very
cool. Yeah,
cool.
we root for Team Hong Kong for that reason. So hope they're doing well. But yeah, it's pretty cool to look at a World Curling event and see Puerto Rico playing India, which is the case tomorrow. You said there, Scott. So like that's pretty cool that these countries that are not obviously traditional curling powers have teams and have folks who are interested in the sport and can represent their country at the international level. And while I think I understand why the World Curling Federation changed the model or the format for the World Mixed Doubles Curling Championship, I love that this exists, that it's just an open competition. If you're a member association and you have a national champion or a team that can represent you, you get to go. So I do like that this still exists,
For
that
sure.
international teams from member associations that probably don't have the resources at this point to qualify for mixed doubles world championships or certainly men's and women's, that this exists and it's a world event.
Yeah. It's pretty special to be able to do that. So very good. I also think, Sean, I just revealed that I'm kind of old because I said she posted on Facebook and woof. Worked out. Anyway.
Well, there you have it. But hey, time marches on, Scott, and Facebook is still there. So
That it is.
Yeah.
That it is.
So thanks so much, everybody, for listening. We will be back with you again very soon. But until then, keep those brooms on the ice and don't dump that intern.
Make the final.